Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? NoZoupForYou here, and today I wanted to talk about something a little different. Not really gameplay or game-related, per se. I mean, it is World War II history-related, it is ship-related, and really the thing that kind of brought this to my attention, and why I want to talk about this, is with what recently happened with the Russian Slava-class cruiser Moskva, which I'm sure everyone knows by now was sunk in rather brutal fashion. Two Neptunes from Ukraine, and you know, there's a lot that can be gained from this incident, a lot that can be gleaned from it. First and foremost, you know, I think complacency was involved, a lot of complacency actually. If you look at the photos of the ship that are emerging right now, none of the directional indicators are pointing where they need to be. It just really seems like complacency killed that ship. A lot of complacency. Probably because they've underestimated Ukraine from day one. Russia in general underestimated Ukraine. I think that was predominant with the military. I think they thought they were going to go in and 3 days later it was going to be all over. And that obviously wasn't the case. And I think the Moskva being out there in the middle of the ocean, or not the ocean, the sea, or I think they felt that they were relatively safe, and I would imagine that there was just this feeling of, oh, that can't happen to us, and like I said, complacency is a killer. In the military, it's a huge killer. So Ukraine decided to target it with two of the Neptune missiles that they had put into service in 2021, and they sank it. I mean, really, really kind of ironic that a country without a navy sank the flagship of the Russians' Black Fleet. I mean, really awesome in a way. But that's not the point of this. That's really not the point of this. The point of this is just naval warfare in general. And I think for many people, especially those that play this game, you know, the game is very clean in that you don't see nearly any of the damage that these ships really take in naval warfare. I mean, you don't see the widespread destruction, the death, anything else, because it's really a PG game. I mean, if even PG, it might even be rated G. I mean, there's no blood, there's no gore, there's no violence. You don't see any of that. And while you won't see that from what happened to the Moskva as a recent example, looking at the photos of it, we can kind of get a picture of what might have happened or how bad it was. And that can be seen by the billowing dark smoke up front, which indicates toxic fumes, high heat, everything else. And then you look at the rear of the ship, and there's just burnouts in the hull of the ship, which indicates that there was a raging inferno down below, and I'm pretty sure anyone that was trapped down there did not make it out. And it was either a very quick death or it was a slow and agonizing death, and you know, slow over the course of you know, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, and that's an eternity when you're in agonizing pain from extreme heat or fire or whatever else. So it was not pretty what happened to a lot of those sailors. And you look at World War II, and going back to that, I think one of the best examples of how brutal, how absolutely brutal naval warfare was, is in Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors by James D. Hornfisher. Even for myself, you know, I was in the Army at the time. I was going through officer courses and reading that book at the same time just to kind of pass my evenings away while I was landlocked on a base, not able to really do anything. And I wasn't even aware of how brutal naval warfare is. I mean, now in hindsight, I could put two and two together, and I could kind of figure out how bad it was. I mean, it's kind of obvious. When you have steel hitting steel, bad things happen. But it is brutal. It is bloody. It is gory. Back in World War II, when you've got 5-inch shells, when you've got 12-inch shells, 16-inch shells hitting steel, steel flies off. It basically becomes shrapnel, and you know, it doesn't just rip through skin. it pulverizes skin. It slices it. It just absolutely demolishes it. And that's just steel on steel. That's just the impact. We're not talking about the secondary ramifications of something hitting a ship. You've got high pressure systems on these ships. So when something blows, you've got overpressure, you've got steam going through, just creating an inferno, incinerating anything in its path for unlucky individuals that happen to be inside these ships. And then on top, you're just an open target for anything. So I think for a lot of us, many of us, I think the fact of how brutal naval warfare is kind of escapes us from time to time playing this game. It was a very, very messy affair in World War II. A very bloody affair. So much to the point that I have actually read accounts of World War II infantry veterans that served in World War II over in Germany and over in the islands near Japan in the Pacific. And they even said they're thankful where they were at than being stuck on a steel ship. Because for them, you know, death comes quick. You either get shot or you get blown up. But out in the ocean, it's a completely different thing. And even if you do survive a ship being sunk by shells or fire or whatever else, then you have to contend with Mother Nature. Then you have to contend with Mother Earth. Then you have to deal with the ocean itself, which is always actively trying to kill you. I know some of you all love the ocean, love swimming in the ocean and everything else, but let's not forget, the ocean is trying to kill you. Always. And everything in the ocean is trying to kill you. And especially out in the Pacific, the things in the ocean are not very nice. So those that survive these ships being sunk and just destroyed by shells, if they made it overboard, they had to survive the elements, and they had to survive the wildlife. And we're already talking about this being bloody. You know, what happens when blood gets in the water? It attracts things you don't want to attract, and now you've got sharks. So, yeah, the Moskva sinking and seeing what happened to it and just the sheer brutality of it kind of made me reflect back on Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, and it made me reflect on just how horrible naval warfare is. And I think for many of us, you know, in the military, it's like, Navy's pretty safe, and maybe that's the case today. Well, obviously not based on what happened to the Moskva, but when things go wrong on a ship, things go very, very wrong. And I guess for the U.S., you know, we've even had recent incidents that highlight this. The USS Cole, the terrorist attack on that, you know, that almost sank the ship. We've had submarines run aground. We've had ships run into other ships. And not making it sound like our Navy's had a lot of mishaps. I mean, it's had some, but they just happen to be much, much higher profile. And then, of course, you've got the turret that blew up on one of the Iowa class, the Iowa. You know, that was bad as well. It killed a lot of men, enclosed in a very tight area with a lot of explosives. And by all accounts, that's one of the things that brought down the Moskva as well. The missiles obviously did their thing, but ammunition and everything else blew up on it. So I can only imagine the absolute calamity and just panic in everyone on that ship when those two Neptunes hit it. I mean, I'm sure below the deck, I'm sure as those missiles punched a hole through it, a lot of sailors were probably incinerated. But those that weren't, those on the top side and everything else, after that, obviously, it became a mad dash to save the ship. Or maybe it didn't. I mean, just seeing how Russia has acted in this war, maybe they just abandoned right away. But there were photos taken the next day. The seas weren't rough or anything. Look it up online. Very interesting from an OSINT and just a, you know, that perspective, an intelligence perspective, gaining what you can, especially if you're into that kind of thing, because already people online are analyzing the photo and are able to draw many, many conclusions. But the overall point of this, again, though, being that naval warfare is brutal. It is a very brutal and bloody thing, and I am thankful I'm in the Army, and I think my granddad was even thankful that he was in the Army in World War II, so very interesting. But pick up Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors if you haven't, because it's probably one of the best looks at World War II naval warfare that you can get anywhere. Really, really good book. And I will catch you all later. Zoop out.